I'm Cynthia James, and this network is about changing lives one woman at a time. Hello, and welcome to Women Awakening. I'm your host, Cynthia James, and I'm always excited to introduce you to an extraordinary woman. All of the women that I review and interview have been here doing great work. They've taken control of their lives and they've stepped into their power. And so I feel honored to bring them to you. I want you to know I do one of these every week, and we're on Spotify and iTunes, iHeart, Spreaker, Amazon, YouTube. You can just subscribe and listen to these shows. It's so incredible because I really believe this is the time for women awakening for real, and that we're the change makers. And so I so grateful that you come here, and I'm so grateful that you come back again and again and meet new women. So my guest today is she's amazing, actually. Her name is Tenesha Curtis. She is the CEO and founder of Volo Press Books, and it allows her to help authors from their planning, writing, editing, to their design needs. She started WriterWorksUniversity.com to offer literary education and support for screenwriters, novelists, poets, and other text-based creatives. So her husband started a company called Pleasanteries. Yes. And she took it over. She took it over and turned it into a literary style shop, allowing writers to show off their love of literature with special designs just for readers and writers. Oh, and let's not forget, she's an independent author herself. She's written in multiple genres, including psychological thriller, mystery, romance, erotica, fantasy, and self-help. Well, all right, Tenesha, welcome.
Thank you.
I am so glad you're here, and I'm so glad to talk about what you do. There's so many people out here who want to be writers and are like, it scares them dramatically.
Understandable. It can be challenging. I think it's different when you're trying to do it professionally, and actually trying to earn a living from it versus, it's just kind of a hobby or something that's kind of therapeutic for you. Of course, I think that's a lot easier. But when they're like, no, I want this to be my full-time job. It's like, okay, that's a lot, but you can do it. But yes, it is a challenge for sure.
Yeah, and you're going to be on a journey for sure.
Yes.
So I want to know where you came from, because I'm sure you were not born and said, well, I'm going to be out there and be a fantastic author and I'm going to train authors. So how did you grow up?
Well, I am from Louisville, Kentucky, and I grew up, I had a pretty good childhood that I can, as far as I was concerned. I went to a school, and I think this was a huge issue, right? Or a huge benefit, let's say. I went to a school that really nurtured the idea that people learn in different ways. And so we had more options about how we express what we learned. So I was maybe not the best test taker, but if you were like, hey, could you write an essay about, I'm like, hey, yes, I can do that. Absolutely. If you let me write an essay, I got you. I can show you everything that I've learned and express it in my own way, in my own voice, as opposed to trying to make it fit kind of answers on a key, So I think that was a huge benefit. And it pushed me towards the literary world. My father, not a big reader himself, but something within him made him go, you know what, I'm gonna start reading to this little girl. And he did, starting with just like Dr. Seuss and stuff like that. And eventually I learned and picked up on, and I think, like I said, a lot of the Dr. Seuss books, that's kind of what made me a poet, right? That's what kind of nurtured that portion of my writing. And then my mother, I think I just got like DNA wise, like genetically, I got loving to read from her as well. So it all came together well. And I've always had very supportive family and friends who read my work and will tell other people about it, so just being supported and doing something that I love has just been hugely helpful.
Well, that's incredible. And you said something that I think is really interesting, and I think it's important for the listeners. We don't all learn the same ways.
Mm,
And so the traditional confines of teaching and testing really don't support everybody. And so
mm-mm.
I love that you knew, let me write about it. Let me write about it, and you will see how much I've learned. I
Yeah.
just think that that's incredible. So before you stepped into this world of really supporting authors, what did you do for a living?
I was a psychotherapist.
Ah,
So, yes, I had my specialization was in addictions counseling. And so I remember literally going, that first semester of college, I was like, okay, I really like to write and read, but I'm also obsessed with human psychology and sociology and, all these diseases that I've heard about, especially like behavioral ones, right? So I had to make a decision. So I went ahead and got my degree in sociology, and then I went back to school and got my master's degree in addictions counseling. And that's, I went ahead and started doing that. Now, of course, always writing on the side and everything, but that was my bread and butter.
well, okay. So let's talk about characters.
Okay.
All this work that you did and looking at all these different levels of behavior,
Hmm.
did you start creating a treasure chest of characters?
Well, I feel like I've always had those, but I think having a deeper understanding of how our brains work and like where our motivation for certain behaviors and thoughts and feelings comes from really helps inform a lot of my writing. Like the book I just released last Friday is about how to outline a book, right? And so I think understanding what it's like to say, gosh, I have all this wonderful knowledge and I would really love to turn it into a book and a product that I could sell, but I just don't know how to get from, A to B on that. Versus thinking about it from my perspective of somebody who's been writing and publishing books for over a decade, right? It's like it's going to be, those are just two different mindsets. So being able to step outside of myself and kind of be a little more empathetic and think, okay, well, if I were a brand new author, never written word one of anything, what would be helpful for me to know so that I can be guided step by step to this next part of my journey? So I think that's really, really helpful.
Oh, that's beautiful. So it's really interesting to me. So here you are being a psychotherapist, you're writing on the side.
Mhm.
Was there a moment that a switch got flipped to have you step into the place where you start supporting others to take this journey?
Okay, well, I think it was more a dimmer switch, gradually
Okay.
going. It wasn't a flip. It was just like, because what would happen is I would publish my own work, right? And then once that's done, I'm going to like book fairs and stuff like that. And I'm selling, and people are going, wow, this is great. Like, how did you do that? And I cannot tell you how many sales I must have lost because I'm sitting here educating a new writer for 30 minutes about the steps that I took instead of like engaging with, with potential customers and trying to sell my book. So I started to get the idea that, maybe I should start doing like some classes or write a book about, this process so that I will be able to just say, well, here, I wrote a book about it, what I mean? And then just give them that as opposed to trying to, spread myself so thin. So it was over the course of multiple years, just realizing, again, that empathy, right? Just realizing that, man, people really don't know this stuff. And I've learned it. It seems intuitive to me now, but it took a while. There's a lot of bumps, there's a lot of potholes I hit, like to get to where I am. So, gosh, it would be great if I could just impart as much of the information upon them as I can, so that they can skip a lot of the hardships that I had to go through with the learning curve. So then that it just kind of slowly developed into what I'm doing now.
Okay, so I totally get that. But I guess two things I want to ask you.
Okay.
One is, how did you start to recognize that it could be financially supportive
Ah.
And then how did you attract clients?
Gotcha. Well, I'll answer in reverse because the answer to your second question is just that kept happening. Like every time I would go somewhere, a writing group, like people, hey, how do I hook up with a decent illustrator? Or hey, how do I get a proofreader? Or hey, how do I do self revisions before I hand it over to an editor? Blah blah blah. Right. So it just started to be like, well, for X amount of dollars, like I can do that for you. And so that was a pretty easy transition. Now, the idea of being paid for it in any significant way, I guess I could say, really came from one of my cousins in New Orleans. We got a big family. We're like New Orleans, Mississippi is like a huge chunk of them. And but like I said, my grandparents had just moved up to Louisville, and that's why I was born there. But and she asked me about helping her publish her poetry book, like the whole thing, not just, hey, can you edit? Hey, can you, look at this and give me some notes, but like, can you just like manage this entire process? And I was like, well, probably. So I just told her, let me do it. And you tell me whatever you feel like is a reasonable price because I'm learning. Right. And I still hold that same philosophy today. If somebody asks me to do something that I've never done before, I say, okay, well, yeah, I'm not going to charge you as much as I normally do because I know that I'm learning on you. But if you're willing to take that risk, hey, like I'm game. Right. So I think that's where it really started to be like, no, I actually could probably make a living doing this. And it, like I said, just kind of took off from there. So yeah, it was just collaborate with my family.
Okay. And then I'm an entrepreneur just like you. And so there's a moment where you decide to take the full step in and trust that you're going to be supported financially. Tell me about that journey for you.
Right. Well, mine was more of a push than a draw, and it was rough. I, like I said, had been doing psychotherapy up in Louisville all this time. It's totally fine. My husband graduated with his PhD, and we were like, oh, he's going to get, a job as soon as he gets done because his degree is in biochemistry, right? I'm like, oh, there's like Pedigree up the road. There's like all these different places I can think of off the top of my head that are going to snatch him up, right? He was unemployed for 2 years, solid, like just nothing but a pile of rejections, right? So I'm like, okay, is there anywhere that you feel like we could go and you would have better job prospects? Like, because this is crazy. Like, this is just ridiculous, And so he's like, well, yeah, when I was getting my master's degree in Atlanta, things seemed to be pretty good. So we could try that. And within 30 days, he had a full-time job of us moving to Atlanta, right? It's just weird. I don't know. So, however, because of course I'm thinking, hey, I'm an addictions counselor. People are struggling with addiction everywhere. I can go anywhere and work, right? Which is true. However, working in Atlanta turned out to be more of a challenge than I expected. From an ethical standpoint, there was just seems like almost everywhere I went, either they did things that they were supposed to do and really cared for people professionally. Therefore, there was only a temporary position open, or I was just filling in for somebody on maternity leave or something like that because people wanted to stay, right? Because it was, they were doing what they were supposed to do. Every other place, they weren't. I mean, people were having sex with clients. They were selling drugs to clients. And I'm just like, okay, I can't do this. So the day for me was the day I was an in-home therapist. So I traveled, right, to the clients' residences. And I was literally on my way home after my last client. And I heard, because we had a treatment team, you have like a doctor, a case manager, like we're all helping, get you together with whatever you need. And I heard the physician's name as having been indicted for selling drugs to client. I was like, I'm done. I'm out. I can't. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, I don't understand. So for me, I was like, okay, well, what else could I do for money, right? And then I'd had that experience with my cousin, and so it kind of all came together where I was like, okay, well, let me just go full throttle into this and see how it works. And so far, so good.
Well, that's incredible. So you really started being an entrepreneur from the ground up. And what did you do to learn how to run a business? Because it's different than having a structure of being a therapist.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, just like with publishing, I just started and I paid attention to the mistakes that I made and just made adjustments. I didn't, and again, this is one of the reasons that I love doing this is because I didn't really have like a mentor or, anybody that I could talk to who kind of knew the ins and outs and could guide me step by step. So that's why I work so hard on producing these workbooks and guidebooks and things so that people have that at least to some degree. People call me all the time. I will spend 45 minutes on the phone with you and not bat an eye, as long as I know that at the end of that 45 minutes, you feel more educated and confident than you did when you first called me, right? So like that's my goal. And so that's really all I did. I mean, it was just trial and error, honestly.
Well, you know what I love about your story is that every aspect of it is fueled by service.
True, true.
You're out there trying to sell your books, and then you're being in service to people who are asking questions at your table. You start the company and you want to be in service, and you also want to be fair in how you work with people.
Mhm.
And so if I'm a new writer and I'm coming to you for support, what are your first questions to me?
What are your goals? Absolutely. Like I don't know how to help someone but then this carried over into therapy too, right? If you're coming to me, you may be court ordered or whatever, but it's like, what do you want to get out of our relationship? Because if all I'm trying to do is beat you over the head with what I think you should be doing, it's going to be an uphill battle the whole way. And it doesn't have to be. It's like, okay, because what I can do is tie the court's goals, right, to your goals and show you how to kind of bridge that gap. So I usually just start with, okay, well, so what are you trying to accomplish here? What kind of book are you trying to write? Why? Hey, I want to get my story out for my family, which I've run into several people like that, to, well, I want to make at least 250K a year selling books, to, you know what I'm saying, and everything in between. So first and foremost, I got to understand what drives you as a writer. Why are you doing this? And then from there, I can kind of help guide you around, like I said, those various pitfalls that I ran into along my journey.
Right. Yeah, well, I think that's really powerful. And I think, getting clear about your goals. But when I meet people, sometimes they're just so vague about where they want to go, what they want to do, what genre. I have a client and she's written partial books in 3 genres. And I'm like, how about finishing one? Let's let's do that, shall we? So 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 what do you give me a couple of tools that you give your clients? Okay, they've set these goals, and then what do they do?
Okay, well, like I said, because it's going to vary quite a bit based on what they want to do. Like, I really am all about you doing things, your way. So, very often, the first thing that, like in her situation, right? Like, she gets 3 different partial manuscripts in these 3 different genres. I would probably ask, well, what genre do you read the most? Like in a given year, what do you think you read the most? Oh, well, I read mostly thrillers, I'd say. I like romance and I like sci-fi, but it's probably got a thriller bent to my reading list. Okay, so do one of your 3 partials have like a thriller element? Well, yeah. There's this one. Okay, well, why don't we just focus on that one then, right? And you see what I'm saying? So just kind of take those steps to kind of figure out what would be kind of the best approach. But then that was the whole point as well of writerworksuniversity.com, right? And by the way, I have merged the company, so it's just WriterWorks University now. There is no Volo Press because things just got a little busy, which is a good problem to have. But it's like, okay, I need everything on one plate. So that's what it's all about. And I will send them there and say, okay, well, there's a lesson about this, there's a lesson about that, because I've literally just dumped my brain about publishing onto that website. So sending them there to read the articles and go through the exercises and so on and so forth is often really helpful because it helps them start thinking about the next steps in their career. So yeah, I think those 2 things, just kind of figuring out where's a good place to start and then finding the articles and stuff on writerworksuniversity.com to help them can really kind of kickstart things.
Well, I love that. Okay. how do you spell WriterWorks, university.com? How do you spell WriterWorks?
Right. WriterWorks is WRITER, just like writer, like normal, but then kind of a German bent to the works, and it's WERX instead of WORKS. So
Okay.
WERX.
WriterWorksUniversity.com.
Mm-hmm.
So I just think this is thrilling because that you're making this available for people, because so many people feel like there's a story in them. There's
Mm-hmm.
something that wants to be communicated and they don't know how to get there. So I love that you're doing that. Yeah, I really do.
Thanks.
So I ask my guests the same last question.
Okay.
This show is called Women Awakening. What do you think is the most important thing about women awakening on the planet at this time?
I think accepting it maybe might be the way to say that. I think a lot of times we get pushed or pulled in a certain direction that could be really beneficial for us, but we fight it.
Mm.
And because it's new, right? Because it's scary, because it's different from what we're used to, even though we may be used to toxicity, we may be used to abuse, we may be used to unhealthy behavior or whatever, right? And so it feels uncomfortable. So I think that in, like I said, all the clients that I've worked with for myself, just being open to the idea that, you know what, yeah, like emotionally, this feels different and kind of scary and uncomfortable. But like, I can definitely see that there's some light at the end of that tunnel versus where I am now. So let me go on ahead and take this risk, right? And see what, see where I end up, because it's probably going to be a lot better than where I am now. So I think just being open to the idea that the universe, if you will, is probably already giving you those doors and leaving them open, but because they don't look like where you're at, you get scared. And just try to push past that fear if you can, and be okay with being uncomfortable sometimes.
I love that, Tenesha, because you know what? Change is not comfortable.
Mm-mm, mm-mm,
Transformation is not comfortable,
mm-mm.
but the rewards are great. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, no problem.
And I'm really grateful that you've been on the show. You know, when I met you, when I sat across that table from you, I thought, okay, I need to know this woman, and I need her to meet my people. So
Oh my goodness. Well, thank you. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I got you and a few other interviews scheduled for this month, so I'm really excited about that. It's been a very long time since I've been on any kind of interview, so this was very cool. Very cool. I appreciate
well, my pleasure to bring you more into the world.
it.
So, ladies, I'm going to say the same thing that I say to you every week in a different form. You're here on this planet at this time because you matter. You're here because your voice matters, your energy, your expression, your power, your light, your gifts. And whatever you have been through, the past does not define you. You can step into your greatness in any given moment. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so grateful. I look forward to seeing you next week, and I'm sending you much love.